Monism, very simply, is the view that there is one thing. Whereas pluralism, very simply, is the view that there are at least two things, or the idea that there are multiple things. Now, those claims are understood in a very big, broad sense. It's not localized, it's universal. In all of reality, monists say, there is only one thing. In all of reality, pluralists say there are multiple things. Now, understood that way, monism is a very, very stark claim. It's very important that we don't let our minds soften it to something more palatable to Western ears. One way we might do that, consciously or unconsciously, is by turning it into the claim that there is ultimately one fundamental kind of thing. So some people think that ultimately everything is physical, for example. They'll say there's no such thing as spiritual stuff, or if there is, it boils down to the physical. So ultimately at bottom, when you get to the bottom layer of reality, everything is physical. Everything that seems to be spiritual ultimately, or non-physical, ultimately boils down to the physical. Now, that's a view, and it's not obviously true, it's not obviously false, we could debate it, but it's not the debate over whether monism is true, right? That's a different debate. The argument over whether there's one fundamental kind of stuff in the world is different from the debate over whether there's ultimately one thing in the world, right? The thing of this mug is a thing, right? And it's also a kind of thing that is a mug. And there are lots of things within that kind. There are lots of mugs in the world. But if we're talking about the thing, the particular thing, there's only one. It's this one right here, okay? So to say that, to talk about monism is to talk about the claim that there's one thing rather than one kind of thing in the world. And that's a starker, more surprising claim, again, at least to Western ears. Okay, so let's talk about the starkness of that claim, that there's only one thing. Now, you might think it's a false start in some way. I mean, aren't there obviously multiple things in the world? I mean, look just right here. It seems like just on this porch, there are multiple things. There are rafters. There's a computer. I guess y'all can't see that, but I can. There's a microphone. There's a person. There are headphones. There are light bulbs. I mean, I'm not counting, but that's got to be at least 5 or 6 things right there. Okay, so this points to the starkness of the monist's claim. And what they'll have to say here is certainly there seem to be multiple things. And I think they usually admit this, that certainly the appearance in the world, and often the very strong, the very tempting appearance, is that there are multiple things. But in reality, there's only one thing, right? There's this appearance versus reality distinction is very important. And you can note, like this, certainly on a much lighter level, or this happens to us all the time, where there seem to be multiple things, but in fact there's only one thing. Superman and Clark Kent. To the people of the town, there seem to be 2 people there. There's Superman and there's Clark Kent. But in reality, there's just one. Okay, so this is a very, very small scale, light example that shows that there can be the appearance of multiple things, even though in reality, there's only one thing. And monists will say this is how everything is, right? There seem to be multiple things on the porch, and even in the world, but ultimately there's just one thing. Now, how do they reconcile those appearances with reality? Well, there's actually a couple different ways they can do this. So take any two apparent things, right? There seem to be 2 things. Take, say, myself and the microphone. There seem to be 2 things there. Now, to reconcile that, even just at a logical level with monism, there's a couple different ways you could do that. One is to deny one or both of the thing's existence. To say, well, there seems to be a microphone and a person, but the microphone doesn't actually exist. Or on the other hand, there seems to be a microphone or a person, but really the person doesn't exist. So there's really only one thing. Okay, so that's one way. But another way you could do it is to say there seems to be a microphone and a person, and they both exist. They're just the same thing, right? So if you have two apparent things, to make that consistent with the claim that really there's only one thing, you can deny the existence of one of them, or you can say they both exist, they're just the same thing. And so ultimately there's just one thing. This is the tactic that many monists, such as Hindus, take to reconcile the appearance of multiple things with the reality that there's one thing. They won't deny that you exist and that I exist and that every other person in the world exists. What they'll claim, though, is that we're all identical. And actually, not just as people, but we're all identical with all of reality. And so there's still just one thing. So that's the appearance of multiple things is explained by the identity of everything at a reality, or in actual reality. So it's a strong illusion, though. In fact, this is people who endorse monism will not deny this feature, that there is at least a very strong illusion that there are multiple things. And this makes it entirely unsurprising then that on these religious traditions, such as Hinduism, on which monism is true, it will often be a very arduous task to even get yourself to believe that monism is true, that there is only one thing. It will take meditation. It will take various forms of yoga. It will take deep wisdom. And in fact, all of this could easily take up a whole lifetime, and in the case of Hinduism, perhaps many lifetimes. It's a very difficult task to gain the knowledge that all of reality is one. The illusion of multiplicity is incredibly strong and has to be overcome. So, on Hinduism, for example, just taking that as an example, you have the claim that Atman, that is the individual soul, is Brahman. That is all of reality. So the individual soul exists. It just doesn't exist as a separate entity from other souls or from other things even in the world. It exists, and other things in reality exist. Hindus will endorse both of those claims. But the way that those claims are identical with, or consistent with monism, is to claim that those things that exist are all identical. So there's still just one thing.